The phone rang, again, a Friday night just past 11. Prime time for bad decisions. Who would call at this hour? Telemarketers, ghosts? Curiosity, that old devil, made me answer. It was Mark. Of course it was Mark. "Hey man," his voice boomed, like he was announcing the end of the world. "Get down to the Bleeding Harp. Big party, free drinks." I hesitated. Free drinks though, the Bleeding Harp was notorious. Like, bring your own bodyguard notorious. Rough crowd, even rougher reputation. "Not tonight, Mark. Think I'll stay in." With Netflix. But Mark could charm the scales off a serpent. He persisted. I relented. Big mistake. Huge. Looking back, I wish I'd stayed home. With a pizza. Wish I had ignored the phone, but I didn't. And here we are. And that's how I ended up in this mess. With wet socks, stuck in a nightmare I can't wake up from. And it was just getting started. What would you do if you were in this situation? The Bleeding Harp lived up to its name. And no, it wasn't a new horror movie. A grimy dive bar on the wrong side of town. The kind of place your GPS warns you about. Neon sign flickered erratically, casting a sickly yellow glow, like it was auditioning for a horror flick. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, sweat, and cheap cologne. Ah, the sweet smell of regret. Mark waved me over, a manic grin plastered on his face. He looked like he just won the lottery. Or lost it. He was already half drunk, swaying to the blaring music. Or maybe he was just practicing his dance moves. "Glad you made it," he shouted over the din. As if I had a choice. "Let's get you a drink." The place was packed. Like sardines in a can, but with more questionable life choices. A sea of faces I didn't recognize. Something felt off. Or maybe it was just my social anxiety kicking in. An underlying tension crackled in the air. Like a bad Wi-Fi connection. But maybe it was just the cheap whiskey already burning a hole in my stomach. Little did I know the night was just getting started. Have you ever felt uneasy in a place like this? Hours melted away in a haze of booze and bad decisions. The music pounded, the crowd swayed, faces became blurred, conversations incoherent. It was like a scene from a bad hangover movie. Mark, true to his word, kept the drinks flowing. Seriously, he could have been a bartender in a sitcom. I remember stepping outside for some air. The coolness helped clear my head, if only slightly. Or maybe it was the sudden lack of tequila fumes. That's when I saw her. A woman, standing alone in the shadows across the street. Cue the dramatic music. She was watching the bar, her expression unreadable. Like she was judging our life choices. She was beautiful, in a haunting sort of way. Long dark hair, piercing eyes. You know, the kind that says, "I see your soul." Our gaze met for a fleeting second. And then, she was gone. Vanished into the darkness. Like a ghost in a cheesy horror flick. Who was she? What was she doing there? And why did she look like she knew something we didn't? What do you think is going to happen next? Back inside, the party raged on. It was like a scene from a movie, except with more questionable dance moves. Mark was regaling me with a drunken story, something about a talking dog and a stolen car. I wasn't really listening. I mean, who steals a car with a talking dog in it? The woman in the shadows had gotten to me. She looked like she belonged in a horror movie, or maybe just really hated parties. Her image, ethereal and unsettling, lingered in my mind. Like that one embarrassing thing you did in high school. "Hey, you alright?" Mark asked, noticing my distraction. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost, or maybe just the bar tab. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Or the last slice of pizza disappearing. I brushed it off, attributing my unease to the alcohol. Or maybe it was the questionable shrimp cocktail. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. Something wasn't right. Like pineapple on pizza. An old man sitting hunched over his drink at the bar caught my eye. He beckoned me closer. "Great, now I'm in a horror movie." "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, his voice barely audible above the music. "Not tonight. Bad things are coming." And then he said something that changed everything. Would you heed a warning like this? Spoiler alert, it's not a new dance move. The old man's words hit me like a punch to the gut. His voice was raspy, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, yet it was clear and sharp. It was as if he knew something that I didn't, something that was about to change everything. Or maybe he just had a really good guess. "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning closer. But he was gone, vanished into thin air. Had I imagined him? The dim lights and the haze of smoke made it hard to tell what was real and what was a figment of my imagination. Or maybe I just needed new glasses, or was he another figment of my booze-addled brain? The night had been a blur of neon lights, pounding music, and endless drinks. My head was spinning and I couldn't trust my own senses. Note to self, lay off the tequila. Suddenly the music screeched to a halt. The abrupt silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the pulsating beats that had filled the air just moments before. Talk about killing the vibe. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. It was as if time had stopped, and everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next moment to unfold. Or maybe they were just waiting for the DJ to play Despacito again. All eyes turned towards the dance floor. The once vibrant and energetic space now felt ominous and foreboding. Not exactly the kind of floor show we were expecting. There, sprawled amidst the spilled drinks and discarded glow sticks, lay a man. His body was motionless and the scene was surreal, like a nightmare come to life. Or a really bad hangover. His eyes stared vacantly at the ceiling, and there was blood, lots of blood. Panic erupted, screams filled the air. The once jubilant crowd was now a chaotic mess of fear and confusion. So much for a fun night out. People surged towards the exits, desperate to escape the carnage. The stampede was relentless and the air was thick with the scent of sweat and terror. And probably some spilled beer. I stood there frozen in place, the stench of fear and copper heavy in my nostrils. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos around me. And wondering if I should have stayed home to watch Netflix. This wasn't a Halloween prank. This was real, and it was terrifying. The flashing lights of the police cars and the wailing sirens only added to the surreal horror of the night. It was a scene I would never forget, etched into my memory forever. But what happened next? Stay tuned to find out. What would you do if you saw something like this? The night was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional distant sound of a car passing by. The bar stood like a sentinel in the darkness, its neon sign flickering intermittently, casting ghostly shadows on the pavement. And no, it wasn't a haunted disco ball. The jukebox, silent only moments before, roared back to life. Its lights danced erratically, casting a kaleidoscope of colors on the nearby walls. The sudden burst of sound was jarring, almost as if the machine had a mind of its own. Maybe it was just trying to get its groove back. But the music was different now. It wasn't the usual upbeat rock and roll or the latest pop hit. Instead, it was a haunting melody, slow and mournful, that seemed to seep into the very soul of the night. Like a sad trombone at a clown's retirement party. Gone was the upbeat tempo, replaced by a slow, mournful melody, the kind of tune that made you think of lost loves and forgotten dreams. It was as if the jukebox was trying to tell a story, one filled with sorrow and longing. Or maybe it just needed a hug. It was a song I knew, a song from my childhood. The notes were familiar, yet distant, like a half-remembered dream. I could almost see the faces of old friends, hear the laughter of days gone by. Ah, the good old days when jukeboxes didn't have existential crises, but I couldn't place it, couldn't remember the words. Mark was gone. His absence was a gaping hole in the fabric of the night, a void that the music seemed to amplify. I felt a pang of loss, a sense of something precious slipping away. Like the last slice of pizza at a party, swallowed whole by the panicked mob. The crowd had surged like a tidal wave, sweeping everything in its path. In the chaos, Mark had disappeared, leaving me alone in the eerie glow of the jukebox. Thanks, Mark, real team player. I stumbled towards the exit, my heart pounding in my chest, but something stopped me. A chill ran down my spine and I felt a presence, cold and menacing, lurking in the shadows. Or maybe it was just the air conditioning. A presence, cold, menacing. It was as if the very air had turned to ice and I could feel eyes on me, watching my every move. The sensation was unnerving, making my skin crawl. Like when you realize you left your phone at home. It felt like eyes were on me, watching my every move. I turned slowly, scanning the room, but there was no one there. Just the empty bar, the flickering lights and the haunting melody of the jukebox. And a partridge in a pear tree. Turning slowly, I scanned the room. The bar was empty now, save for a lone figure standing by the jukebox. The shadows seemed to cling to her, making her appear almost ethereal. or maybe she just really liked that spot. The bar was empty now, save for a lone figure standing by the jukebox, the woman in the shadows. She was closer now, her presence both intriguing and terrifying. Like a cat that wants to cuddle but also might scratch you, the woman in the shadows. She was closer now. Her eyes, like chips of ice, locked onto mine. And she was smiling. It was a smile that held secrets, promises, and perhaps a touch of danger. Or maybe she just had a really good dental plan. Her eyes, like chips of ice, locked onto mine, and she was smiling. The kind of smile that sent shivers down your spine, making you question everything you thought you knew about the night and its whispers. And then, she took a step forward. What happened next would change everything. Have you ever heard something strange in a quiet place? Her smile, it wasn't human. It was as if she had borrowed it from a nightmare, a twisted parody of joy that sent shivers down my spine. The dim light of the bar cast eerie shadows on her face, accentuating the unnatural curve of her lips. I mean, who needs a horror movie when you have this? It held a chilling malice, a predatory hunger. Her eyes, dark and hollow, seemed to pierce through my very soul, searching for something to devour. I could feel the weight of her gaze, heavy and oppressive, as if she was drawing the very life out of me. Note to self, never make eye contact with strangers in creepy bars. The air crackled with an unseen energy, raising goosebumps on my arms. It was as if the very atmosphere was charged with a malevolent force, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Every breath I took felt thick and heavy, laden with an unspoken dread. Or maybe it was just the bar's questionable air conditioning. The room seemed to warp and twist around her, shadows dancing to a melody only she could hear. The walls seemed to close in, the ceiling lowering, as if the very space was being consumed by her presence. The shadows flickered and swayed, creating grotesque shapes that seemed to mock my fear. Seriously, where's a light switch when you need one? The smoke from the now abandoned cigarettes on the bar swirled and eddied, taking on grotesque shapes. It was as if the smoke had a life of its own, forming twisted faces that leered and jeered at me. Each puff of smoke seemed to carry a whisper, a faint echo of despair. And here I thought quitting smoking was the hard part. Faces formed and dissipated, contorted in silent screams, their eyes pleading for release. Were they victims? Were they warnings? Each face seemed to tell a story of agony, of torment, as if they were trapped in an eternal cycle of suffering. Their eyes, wide and desperate, seemed to reach out to me, begging for salvation. Talk about a smoke break gone wrong. Fear, raw and primal, surged through me. It was a fear unlike any I had ever known, a deep-seated terror that gripped my very core. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a deafening drum that echoed in my ears. I could feel the cold sweat trickling down my back, my body trembling with the intensity of my fear. And I thought my last blind date was bad. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move, to break free from her gaze. It was as if an invisible force was holding me in place, trying to keep me rooted to the spot. But I knew I had to escape, had to get away from the suffocating presence that threatened to consume me. Note to self, leg day at the gym is paying off. My hand reached for the door, seeking escape, salvation. The cold metal of the doorknob was a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the room. I twisted it desperately, my fingers fumbling in my haste. The door seemed to resist, as if it too was under her spell, but I pushed with all my might. Come on, door, don't fail me now. This wasn't a bar anymore. It was a tomb. The once lively atmosphere was now a graveyard of forgotten memories, a place where joy had been replaced by dread. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of the city outside. And I thought my local dive bar was bad. And I was trapped inside. The walls seemed to close in around me, the exit just out of reach. I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing down on me, suffocating me. I had to get out, had to escape this nightmare before it consumed me completely. But just as I reached the door, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. What would you do if you saw faces in the smoke? Her laughter, cold and sharp as shattered glass, pierced through the pounding in my ears. It bounced off the walls, echoing the screams of the damned. Each chilling peal pushed me closer to the edge, to the precipice of madness. "Where are you going?" she purred, her voice a seductive whisper that promised pain and oblivion. "The party's just getting started." The jukebox, as if obeying her command, shifted its tune once more. This time it was a waltz, its tempo quickening, becoming frantic. I stumbled back, away from the sound, away from her. My hand trembled on the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. We were trapped. She had me right where she wanted me. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I slipped on a banana peel. The clock struck midnight. And then a shadowy figure approached. What happened next? You'll have to wait to find out. Have you ever been scared by something you couldn't see? The room spun, the music a cacophony of terror. Or maybe it was just really bad DJing. Her laughter swelled, threatening to consume me whole. Note to self, never tell a joke after midnight. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the inevitable. Like when you see your ex at a party. This was it. This was the end. But then, silence. An eerie, unsettling silence. I opened my eyes. The bar was empty. The woman was gone. Did I just get ghosted by a ghost? The jukebox stood silent, its lights dimmed. Even the jukebox had enough of my song requests. Had it all been a hallucination? A drunken nightmare? Or just another Saturday night? I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the stillness. Long enough to question my life choices. The door, no longer locked, creaked open. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because who needs closure, right? Some doors are best left unopened. Like the fridge after a week-long vacation. Some invitations are best left unanswered. Especially those from your weird neighbor. But some nights stay with you forever. And then, the door creaked open again. Would you open a door if you didn't know what was behind it?